Hi, David. Thank you for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is David Hitt. I live in Huntsville, Alabama, aka the Rocket City. I am a communication strategist by day, but I am also a bit of a informal spaceflight historian. I've written a couple of books about spaceflight history, homesteading space, the Skylab story, Bold They Rise, the space shuttle early years. That's given me the opportunity to be part of some space documentaries like Saving Skylab, Engineering Catastrophes. Hobby-wise, here in Huntsville, I'm involved in local history community, do stuff like be part of the Historical Society, lead ghost walks of downtown Huntsville, which is a lot of fun. Um, Bachelor's degree in newspaper journalism, but I am currently in my third semester of a program working on a master's degree in systems engineering, which is a little bit of a leap from where I started. My wife, Rebecca, and I have a 2-year-old and a border collie. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Well, that's awesome. So what inspired you to write those books?
Oh gosh. So the first one, I was working at the time as a contractor supporting NASA education, writing stories for teachers and students about just kind of stuff going on at NASA. Some of the stories we would do, oh, there's the anniversary of this program coming up, and so digging for story ideas. Oh man, the 30th anniversary. This was a little while back. The 30th anniversary of Skylab is coming up. I should do a story about that. And so realized that I had a Skylab astronaut living at the time here in Huntsville with me. Called him up, hey, look, can I ask you some questions? I'm thinking he's going to do, yeah, sure. Go ahead, ask me some questions. He's like, yeah, why don't you come on over and we'll sit down, we'll talk for a while. I'm going to an astronaut's house. Like, this is pretty cool. And so as a result of those conversations, suddenly the story got, a lot bigger than I had planned for it to be. And it turned into a 3-part series. And so that means I'm having to do a little bit more research for it. And in the process of doing the research for it, at the time, and again, this is, oh gosh, almost 20 years ago now. There was there was a lot of information about Apollo, right? The moon landing, super sexy, super exciting. Space shuttle was still being flown at the time. There was almost another decade of the space shuttle left. So there was a lot out there about the space shuttle. And then here's, like poor old Skylab between these two giants. And there's just not a lot out there. And I thought, somebody needs to do something about this. Somebody needs to write a book about this. And not me. Somebody else needs to to do this. And over the process, it took almost a year of just various little encounters of okay, somebody needs to do this, and I'm beginning to realize that somebody probably needs to be me. And so came back. And I was when I had that realization, I was out in Houston, Texas. They have the Space Center Houston Museum. They have an amazing Skylab exhibit. I'm standing there by this Skylab exhibit. This is when, okay, like it's supposed to be me. And so I get back home, I go back to Huntsville. I send an email to Owen Geary at the Skylab astronaut that invited me to his house. I said, hey, look, got this idea. I think you should write a book. At the time, I'm just thinking like it's his memoirs or something. I haven't come up with a full-fledged Skylab book. So I sent him an email. Said, hey, look, I've got this idea. I want you to hear me out. Let me buy you lunch and we'll talk about it. And at the time, I'm thinking, here's what's going to happen is I'm going to have lunch with an astronaut, and I'm going to say, you should write a book. And he's going to say, no, who are you? and why are we having this conversation? And I'm going to go home that evening and I'm going to say, hey, Dad, guess who I had lunch with today? Right. And like, that's going to be a win. And, and 20 years later, I'm going to be talking about that time that I had lunch with a Skylab astronaut. And instead I do the pitch, and at the point where he was supposed to say, like, no, he's like, well, that sounds like a good idea. Oh, huh, okay. Because I'm bluffing, right? I've never written a book. I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about getting a book published. I'm having to, to go home and call the friend of, the brother of a friend of mine who who works in publishing. They're like, well, what do I do now? And so, you know, like I said, here we are. It exists. So that's kind of the sorry, long story to it. It's a simple question, but that's how the first book came about, and they're all part of a series. It's part of the award-winning Outward Odyssey series published by the University of Nebraska Press. So I'm one of, oh gosh, like a dozen authors who have written. The book is now 20-ish series. 20-ish. The series is now 20-ish books long, of which I've done 2. So the second one came about, you know, after as the first one was winding down. You know, hey, look, we've got these books about shuttle that need to be part of the series. We're still looking for authors. How would you feel about that? I grew up with shuttle. You know, I was what, 5 when the first shuttle launched. My dad grabbed me, put me in front of the black and white TV. We watched the first shuttle launch together. So it's always had a special place in my heart. So getting to write that one was kind of a little bit of a love letter to a program that has always been special to me.
Yeah, I mean, Skylab is really amazing. I've seen that exhibit you talk about. I actually saw the exhibit in the 80s as well, when it was just in like a random building that you would like walk to before they built Space Center Houston. But you know, Owen's son actually is a space tourist.
Yes,
Yeah. A private space adventurer, I think would be more, he probably like that instead of tourist.
I almost said, because I've almost lost track of current events, that they are the only American father-son duo, and I think that may be true. But there's now one of the Blue Origin New Shepard flights. Alan Shepard's daughter flew, so they're no longer the only multiple generation American spaceflight family. But yeah, they were the first. When the book was coming out, the month that Richard flew, actually, when he flew, he couldn't carry the book itself because it's heavy, and and mass is a thing. Mass and volume are a thing when you're going to space. But we printed out little postcards with the cover of the book, and he flew some of those. So yeah, he comes back. He's been back on Earth for like a week. I go out to Houston and they do a book signing because the book has just come out and Richard's there. So yeah, it was kind of a big month for the Garriots, and just an exciting time to get to latch on to.
That is really awesome. Yeah, I did. Well, I wanted to ask you about our next trip to the moon. I had a few questions about that. Did you know that we're going back to the moon?
I've heard a little bit about that. It's kind of inescapable in my world. So yeah.
And how did you find out about it?
Oh, well, okay. So I will tell you. So the job that I had 3 years ago. 3 years ago and 3 days ago, I think, I'm forgetting. I'm trying to do the math. I was, again, working as a contractor supporting NASA Marshall, down at what I say that I take that back. I knew that we were going back to the moon. Like there was a general, hey, let's go back to the moon. But I was down at a meeting at Kennedy Space Center where they were kind of talking about what does this moon lander look like? And they turned the TV on, and there's the Vice President of the United States back home in Huntsville at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center at a meeting of the National Space Council. And as we're in the middle of this meeting, like, okay, what does this look like? He says, oh, by the way, you're doing it in 5 years. And so that was I guess that's not exactly what you asked, because that was the general, oh, we're going back, but the intense immediate, okay, like, no, seriously, y'all, this is happening and it's happening soon. That's where I was, because it was a 2-day meeting, a 3-day meeting. This was lunch on the first day. And so the rest of the meeting is people getting up with their PowerPoint presentations and and we're probably going to have to speed this up. Just kind of this weird, excited but overwhelmed vibe in the room.
Well, I've started out this project with the intention of interviewing just random people off of the street, like at Starbucks, you know, at the mall, on, you know, just wherever I happen to be, at the airplane, lucky people. Anyway, and and out of those people, the non-space people, if you will, just the random general population, I would say less than 20% of them know that we're going back to the moon.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
is that in line with sort of your expectations and what you feel?
So, well, and first, let me say, you know, I love the project. I found it early on, and when it was a little more, you know, unfiltered by the fact that you have folks in the space community who have just like really glommed onto this. And so, you know, I got connected because a friend of mine who's an astronomer down in Birmingham, like, oh, you need to do this. And so, you know, like now there's a little bit of there's probably a little bit of community bias involved, but you know, I was watching some of the ones just this week, and you know, and yeah, still seeing some of those, you know, the like you say, the person on the street sort of interviews, and you know, so the funny thing is, so my wife works at the Space Center Houston equivalent here in Huntsville, the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, a wonderful museum. She's the archivist out there, but oh, when she first started out there, she was doing bus tours. Um, the museum does a bus tour, takes you out to NASA Marshall, lets you see the historic test stands, all those sorts of things. The science mission control for the space station, the the water recycling project, right? Because on the space station, you know, we're not launching a whole lot of new water. You're kind of making do with recycling what's up there. Yesterday's coffee is tomorrow's coffee, as they like to say. And so they would take the folks to the building where they build the equipment that turns urine into drinking water. And the point of the story, though, is when she first started doing this, and this is, you know, 10 years ago, so this is a little bit after the shuttle stops flying, she would have people get on the bus, and she would they would ask her, you know, oh, are we going to go to where NASA used to be?
Ah,
And it's just like it's still there. I mean, there's still a NASA. So yeah, I mean, it's weird times. I mean, I think we've kind of pulled out of the you know, does NASA still exist? But I was talking to somebody recently that works down in Florida, and works at Kennedy Space Center, and they were saying that somebody, I mean, like fairly recently said, you know, oh man, it's so exciting that that when NASA shut down, you know, let SpaceX buy the by the Kennedy Space Center. And so, you know, yeah, after the end of shuttle, I mean, there was just kind of this weird, do we still have a space program? I mean, like, is this, and you know, and there are a lot of folks who are very involved in making things happen. Yes, you know, we just put something on Mars. Did y'all not see that? They just put something on Mars. We still have a space program. And so, yeah, you know, I mean, the is not only didn't know we're going to the moon, didn't know that we're still going to space, didn't know that that it still exists. But the exciting thing is, you know, I mean, during the you know, the quietest times, during the midst of all of the you know, the post shuttle development, there's a knowledge, you know, like just hang on. Like I get where you're coming from. I respect, you know, I respect that for the outside. It you know, it's a little bit quieter. We're not putting things in, you know, putting people in space from America right now. But just hang on a little bit, because you know, Crew Dragon's in development, Orion's in development, Starliner's in development. You know, we're going to go from not having an American spaceship anymore to having an American space fleet now of all these different vehicles. And so I, you know, hopefully with you know, Crew Dragon now flying American astronauts to space station, there's a little bit more awareness. Like, yes, you know, the American space flight is still a thing. And now with SLS on the launch pad, you know, hopefully there's going to be increasingly, you know, kind of that awareness of, you know, we're not only still in the space business, but we're in it a big way, and we're going to be doing exciting things. And you can, you know, the news can be out there, plans can be out there, development can be out there, PowerPoints can be out there, political speeches can be out there. But none of it kind of has the same effect as fire and smoke as something leaving the launch pad. So yeah, hopefully, knock on wood, we're getting close to kind of changing that paradigm a little bit.
And a lot of it I think has to do with how we get our news now. In 1969, whenever the first people stepped foot on the moon, if you made it into the city's newspaper, if you made it onto the 3 nightly network channels at night, if you made it into just a handful of national magazines, pretty much everybody knew about that thing. And it was a little frustrating for people who were really interested because they could only know what everybody else knew. They couldn't dig further into it. It's like people who were interested in Apollo 12, for example, they're out of luck. Unless you happen to be working and around Houston and could go to the Johnson Space Center or something. You couldn't turn on like some news feed and actually see anything about Apollo 12.
Yeah, and that's been interesting to watch. I've been seeing stuff in the media, some chatter about the SLS wet dress rehearsal is coming up this weekend. They're going to tank the thing on the launch pad for the first time, and they're gonna stream. I think the last I saw on trying to follow this on Twitter, they're going to stream the video, but they're not going to stream the audio. And there are people who are disappointed that they're going to get to see it, but they're not going to get to hear it. And I saw somebody pointing out, okay, like for Apollo 4, for the equivalent of this back in the 60s, like you say, I mean, you read about it in the newspaper, in a small, like there was a paragraph about it in the newspaper, maybe the next day. We've gotten, today this instantaneous news culture where you want to know everything and you want to know it right then and you want to see it happen, and it's exciting. But yeah, it's like you say, it's very different than the last time that a project like this happened.
I like to think of it from a news perspective and from like a public dialogue perspective. All of our interests were sort of tied together and limited by just the avenue of getting information out, and that the fact that everybody's consuming the same sorts of things. So people didn't have really choice in terms of what they were being exposed to, but everybody knew what everybody else was being exposed to. Like, I mean, I could tell you about how silly that article was or this, and you like know about it, and that type of thing. But it's like how like that's completely turned around to be completely opposite in today's time, where we don't have that common space where everybody's kind of literally on the same page. And instead, I can know lots of things that other people don't know, and they know way more things that I don't know, and we have like no basis for even starting a conversation.
Yes, yeah. So you just coincidentally, just last night, I'm listening to a podcast and it's talking about the history of the Titanic, and it's and then from there it's okay to talk about this. We have to talk about probably a lot of what and think about the Titanic comes from the 1997 movie Titanic, and from there, okay, and for like the younger people, let me explain. Like everybody watched the movie Titanic. Like we all it was a common culture because we had the monoculture, right? If a song was number one, because the song from Titanic, the My Heart Will Go On, like that was number one. So everybody heard the song because it was number one. And the guy on the podcast, and it's true for me. Like I could not begin to tell you what the number one song on the Billboard charts is right now. If you ask me to name the top 5, I don't think I could get the top 5 artists on the Billboard chart right now. I mean, because it's not just information. We all, I mean, I'm growing up and I've got ABC and CBS and NBC, and on a good day the antennas pick up the local PBS station. But so we've all got 3 choices, and of those, I mean, like one of them at any given time slot is the best. I mean, like okay, at 7 o'clock on Thursday, you know, ABC and NBC or CBS are going to be all showing something, but one of them is like, okay, Dallas, we're not going to put our good stuff about against Dallas because everybody's watching Dallas, right? And so, you know, yeah, so you go to work the next day, and you know, we're all talking about who shot JR, because we all watched it because it was one of the three choices that we all had, and it was the best choice of what we all, you know, the best of the three choices we all had. And yeah, and now, and the other, but the other big difference is, so, you know, I come from a newspaper journalism background. I get out of college, I've got a megaphone, and I can talk to 10,000 people, right? I'm working at the weekly newspaper in Indianola, Mississippi. I write stuff. We've got a readership, like I said, of about, you know, about 10,000 people in Sunflower County. I can write something, and 10,000 people will read it. And that's a big deal, right? You know, I mean, for the average person in you know, in 1990, 1997, you know, I'm working at the paper. If you had wanted to, I'm gonna say something to 10,000 people, and you're not somebody like me who is blessed with the power, you know, has been given the authority from on high to speak to 10,000 people. It's hard, you know. And you know, now, oh gosh, you know, last year I tweeted something about Nancy Reagan looking at the space shuttle when it landed at White Sands, and you know, like 150,000 people saw this tweet with Nancy Reagan looking at Space Shuttle Columbia after it landed at White Sands, you know, in the early 80s. Nobody gave that to me, right? I mean, we all have that now. And so, yeah, you know, we all get different information, and we're all living in different worlds, but there's no longer any, you know, any gatekeeping to having that sort of megaphone. And now we're getting into really sorry, now we've got totally sidetracked. Man, that has ramifications for our society, like the you know, the fact that that person that you're listening to, okay, who are they, what do they actually know?
I know. And the things that make it out are the most surprising, the most disruptive things, the most surprising, maybe the most destructive things in some respects. They're you know, a well-reasoned argument, it's kind of boring.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's appeal to, you know, uh, that the job that I was talking about when I was, you know, first started working on the book in education. Part of the job was answering questions from the public. And so one of the questions I got a whole lot was, you know, hey, I was watching Fox, and they had this special, and it said that the moon landings were a hoax. You know, what can you tell me about that? And I get the appeal, right? I mean, because if they are, and you figured it out, right? I mean, and like NASA, you know, they're supposed to be pretty smart, and they're trying to fool you, and you got through the being fooled by NASA. What does that say about you, right? I mean, like they're pretty smart, but I outsmarted them. You know, the Soviet Union, they had a space program, first person in space, first satellite, you know, first animal in orbit, first space station. But yeah, they're supposed to be pretty smart, but they never figured out that moon hoax thing. But you know who did? And so what does that say about you? And now though, you're sitting in, you know, back then, 20 years ago, you're sitting in your basement and you're feeling pretty good about yourself. But now you've got the community, right? Now you can connect. Now you can find all sorts of people, and you can all feel good about each other. You know, you're no longer the smartest person in the room, because you're not the sole person that figured it out. But you know, like, hey, you know, you, man, you're pretty smart. You figured it out. And you know, yeah, I totally get the appeal of wanting to feel that way, of wanting to have that feeling of, you know, oh, I'm smarter than NASA. And you know, and I think there's a little bit of that in various areas. You know, yeah, there's kind of a nice feeling of, you know, I figured out the thing that the smart people didn't want me to figure out. I saw through the thing that I wasn't supposed to see through. And you know, I'm sympathetic to it, but you know, it's also not necessarily healthy a lot of times.
Well, and you know, if that isn't enough for you, you could go completely, you suspension of reality, and you got the flat earthers.
You do. I mean, yeah, they like I said, that ability to the ability to create easy community has created a lot of interesting communities.
I mean, it's like, what's the passphrase? Flat Earth. Oh, okay, you're it. It's like, and I think a lot of it's that. It's like, where it's like goes back to our tribal nature, like
Yeah,
wanting to be part
yeah,
of a group,
yeah,
and for some, being a member of some groups is a matter of paying a membership fee and filling out a form. To be members of other groups, you need to get a tattoo or something, and to be members of other groups, you just need to be able to completely suspend any connection with the greater majority.
yeah, yeah. No, I think your tribalism is dead on. We have a hunger to belong.
So yeah, if it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
Uh, yes, 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 yes. The fun thing now is like there's a menu, right? I mean, like 10 years ago, you take a trip to space. Like that's okay. 10 years ago, you're gonna take a trip to space. You're talking about like, oh, I'm gonna fly on the space shuttle. Like I know what that is. Okay, so I'm gonna go. I'm gonna spend, like, week or two in orbit. And now, it's like, okay, so I had to kind of mentally, okay, are we talking like, a Blue Origin New Shepard flight up and down, and I see the curvature of the Earth, or are we talking like, like, okay, so Mark Vande Hei just got back from 355 days on the International Space Station, and no, like I've got a 2-year-old at home. I totally respect the people that will do that. I've been working at home now for the last 2 years, and it's made me appreciate, like space flight in a whole new way. Because when I started working from home, and I'm no longer going to work, and I'm no longer going to all these places that I used to go to, like suddenly I got to go for a walk became a very
Right.
important thing to me. Like I need to get away from my computer. I can't stare at this thing any longer. I need to get outside. I need to I need to be away. And then I'm doing that one day. I'm like, okay, yeah, like Mark can't do that. Like there is no, I'm just gonna go out for a walk. Like that's not an option. And so, I think the pandemic has increasingly made me realize 6 months on the space station, those are better people than I am. Like that would not be as much fun as I thought it would be, 2 years ago. Um, you know, um, the Inspiration 4, like they did the 2 days of the capsule. Um, and then like, I'm biased. Like Skylab, let me do a month on Skylab. Like I would do a month on Skylab in a heartbeat. Like that's the sweet spot. Um, Artemis, okay, the moon. Like, okay, would you like, we're gonna spend like a week on the moon, and it's a 2-week round trip. Yes, I'm in. Sign me up. I would I would totally do that one. I had the opportunity years ago through the book. So you talked about Owen, you talked about his son Richard, space tourist, his son Richard involved in Space Adventures, which is the company that booked those space tourism flights. Among other things, they also do booking for Zero G, which is the company that has the vomit comet, they used to call it, airplane that does the parabolas, and so you get to be weightless for 30 seconds at a time. And so, gosh, what, 15 years ago, Richard gives Owen a ticket. Owen is like, I've kind of done the weightless thing, right? Would you like this ticket? I would take that ticket. So I got to do a zero G flight, and then the zero G flight, they do, everybody knows about the weightlessness, where it's like you're in space for 30 seconds at a time. What's less known is you work up to that. So you're starting, obviously you're on the ground, your Earth gravity, one full 1G. The next thing you do is you do Mars. Mars is about a third of Earth's gravity. So you do some parabolas where you're not going full weightless, you're doing like 1/3 gravity. You do that a time or two. Okay, now we're going to do 1.6. Now we're going to do lunar. And so you're experiencing lunar gravity. Okay, now we're going to go full weightlessness. Oh man, lunar gravity. Oh, that is sweet stuff. That was it was more of a revelation. It was more interesting to me than even the weightlessness. Because I, like, in my head, okay, now I'm just totally rambling, but in my head, like, Earth is one, and the space station is essentially zero microgravity. And in my mind, it's like it's binary, right? Mars is a planet. It has gravity. The moon is a world. It has gravity, and so these things are more like Earth than they are like weightlessness. But it really was kind of this sliding scale, and the moon really kind of was, like, closer to this end of the scale than it was to this end of the scale, and that really surprised me. And so that's one of the things, with going back to the moon, bringing you back to what we're supposed to be talking about. The first time they went for a few days at a time, they're in this little spaceship. As we're going back for sustained presence, right? We're going back. We're gonna have a base camp on the moon. We're gonna have people that are staying long duration on the moon. But there's going to be a habitat on the moon, right? They're going to have a little base, a little home on the moon, which means the thing that they're going to get that Apollo astronauts never got is the ability to take off their spacesuit and have room to move around. So they're going to be the first ones to kind of really, really experience that lunar gravity for the first time, in the way that the Apollo astronauts, never really got to, because of kind of confined spaces and short time and everything. And and then, like, that's the thing that I'm most jealous of. Like, if if I got to go to space, but I got to pick the mission, like Artemis Base Camp, like, I want to be in that habitat on the moon. Again, like, maybe I'll be gone for a month, like a month and a half, I guess, there and back. We've got good communication now. I can talk to my son with the 8-minute delay. He'll be fine. And 6 months gone, a year gone, no, but yeah, that I would do.
It's gonna be an amazing time. Yeah, I hope the wet dress rehearsal goes well. I hope the launch goes well this summer. Artemis 2 happening in 2024 with the trip around the moon, and then the lander in 2025. I know those dates are going to slip. I mean, just because of the nature of spaceflight, right? I hope they don't, but I hope we don't. I mean, I hope we stick with it like we did with James Webb. I mean, there could have been a time where people are like, maybe we don't need the telescope, but now it's working like perfectly, right? It's like really, really going to be great. Do you see a future where humanity actually has a presence off of the Earth, where there are, like, people who spend their entire lives off of Earth?
Yeah. Okay, since you asked that as a totally nebulous question, like, do I see a future? Yes, totally, I do. Is that 2050, or is that 2150, or is that 2500? So I've got a book that was written in, I want to say, 57, 58, called Your Trip to Space. And so this is written, like, around the time of Sputnik. It may have been 58. Nobody has been to space. And it's saying that people are going to go to space, right? This is that's the title. Your trip to outer space. Human beings are going to go to space. This is going to happen. And I mean, like, and it gets that, like, it's not going to be you, and it's not going to be me, like, these first trips. There's going to be, like, professionals, and then it'll work towards. but people are about, people are going to go to space. This is going to happen. Like it's coming, kind of soon. In fact, someday human beings will go to the moon, probably in your lifetime, possibly by the year 2000. And it's right there. I mean, Yuri Gagarin, Alan Shepard, they're like 3 years away or something. The first footsteps in the moon, they're a little more than a decade off. And to him, like maybe by the end of the century, we're going to see people on the moon. And this is a guy that was smart enough to write a book about it. Like he got a book published about it. I mean, this is not some Joe Schmo off the street. This is a guy that studied this whole space thing and knew enough about it to write an entire book about it and get it published. And in his mind, it's still, like half a century away. And in fact, it's like a decade. And so that's my dream. Like that's my dream, is that, that someday people are sitting around and like, that David Hitt guy, he was smart enough to write a book about space, and yet he had no clue like what was just around the corner. And so like if you ask me today, like intellectually, okay, like based on the maturity of technologies and based on the national will and based on the historic arc of how these things have developed, and and where are we and what do we need to do and to get people on Mars, and these are the the trajectories and yada 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 yada. Like, are there people living full time in space? Like by 2050, like it's easy to say, like I wouldn't put money on that. As somebody who has read Your Trip to Outer Space, like it's the thing, because what he didn't get was the thing that wasn't on his radar was not the technology or the physics, but the thing that wasn't on his radar was this young president who is not even running for president yet, when he's writing the book saying, hey, the Russians can't beat me. And that one decision, like the whole book goes out the window. So, like you can talk about the technology and you talk about the capabilities and you can talk about those sorts of things, but what's the one thing, the one person making that one decision? And like you said earlier, we live in the age of disruption. That used to be weird. That used to be weird when you have that one person who makes that one decision, that one group that does that one thing, that one country that decides this one surprise. Now, like, oh, what got disrupted today? Like what was today's giant disruption? So who knows? So yeah, again, long answer to a simple question. Yes, I totally embrace that future. The pessimist in me, like, is it gonna happen in my lifetime? Like, how healthy am I right now? The optimist in me, yeah, it takes that one day. It takes that one person, that one day doing that one thing, and the future is totally different.
So let's assume that happens. Some descendant of yours, perhaps even you, have moved to Mars, and it's now like 200 years in the future. Your great granddaughter has grown up on Mars her entire life. She's now in history class doing a paper on the 2020s, just like we might do a paper on the 1820s now, right?
Right.
And she sees this video. Is there any like tidbit about the 2020s that you think could help set her paper apart from her peers?
Oh gosh. So there's a William Faulkner quote, and I'm going to butcher it. I decline to accept the end of man, the fall of man. I believe that he will not only survive, he will prevail. Man, we're living in a time of a lot of negativity. We're living in a time of a lot of negativity. We're living in a time of like you said, a lot of tribalism. We're living in a time of, like you talked about, like really weird um, news clouds and and bubbles and things, and it's easy to buy into a negative view of the world, of society, of where we're going. I mean, I, you almost need to with that question attach a news summary of what is happening right now, Friday, April 1st, 2022. I mean, let's talk about Ukraine, and let's talk about inflation, and let's talk about politics, and let's talk about this, and let's talk about that. And man, this is the world that we're talking to you from. Um, but we're sitting in this world and we're talking about people on the moon, right? I mean, and this is not the first time that we've been here. I mean, the late, we keep going back to the world that we put people on the moon the first time in. I mean, it was not it was not Camelot anymore, right? I mean, it was a time of Vietnam and very real civil rights struggles, and a lot of hardship going on, not only in our nation but in the world. And that was the world in which we put people on the moon. And and here we are again, 50 something years later, and in a world where we can find a whole lot to disagree with each other about. But at the same time, hey, maybe we can come together. Maybe we can put people on the moon. Maybe we can have something to look forward to. Maybe we can find the light in all the darkness. And so, I mean, gosh, I future great granddaughter on Mars. Like I hope you're living in a world that's figured out a lot of things that we. I mean, I know if you're on Mars, you are living in a world that's figured out a lot of things that we haven't yet. But the getting smarter isn't the answer. The technology isn't the answer. We have technology that they didn't have. Um, 50 years ago. We have knowledge that they didn't have 50 years ago, but that doesn't mean that we're any better at getting along with each other than they were then. So I hope that for all your technology and all your knowledge, that somewhere along the way you've also better at getting along with each other. But on the off chance that you're sitting on Mars and your iPhone 231 brain chip is telling you about the big conflict on the moon between the folks in the Sea of Tranquility and Shackleton Crater are threatening violence against each other. Yeah, just know that there's light in the darkness. Know that even in times of negativity and turmoil, that there is something about the human spirit that lets us pull together and do incredible things that we never thought we could do.
That's really amazing. And I was just like thinking, there's going to be a time on Mars where you will literally know everybody on the world that you live on. Like yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't date you if you're the only guy on Mars. Well, I am. I mean,
You're like, let me reconsider. Maybe Thursdays only, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, there you go.
But David, thank you so much for the time. I know we covered a lot of topics. Is there anything that you want to talk about or any questions you had for me?
No, I don't think so. I just like I said, so glad that you're doing this. It's space folks tend to like I said, we tend to be we kind of can be a bubble. And we can talk to ourselves, and even now we're not even a homogenous bubble. I mean, there's not even a space monoculture anymore. We're falling into there's the team this and team that and team whatever, and the even within the space tribe, it's now little tribes. And so yeah, this project that, like, okay, let's get out of the bubble. Like let's reach out and let's leave our tribe and let's talk to folks and let's engage folks and let's share that excitement. But let's also take a look at what it looks like for the outside looking in, because that's such a healthy thing. I got to go You know, like I said, been shut down because of the pandemic, but got to go last month up to New York to an education event, talking to school kids about space stuff. And yeah, just getting out of that bubble and talking to real people who were just, you know, they're touring New York. They hey, let's go to this museum, and all of a sudden here's NASA right in front of them, and they're coming up and having a conversation with NASA. And you know, I mean, they didn't know that's what they were doing that day. They weren't looking for a space conversation, but they're just, you know, hey, let's you know, so what do you know? What do you think about this? What do you you know, would that same question, you know, hey, would you go? You know, and just such a healthy thing, such an exciting thing to see, you know, their excitement about what's going on. So you know, the fact that that was a cool experience that I got to have because of where I am, that I got to make that trip and got to talk to those people. But the fact that you're like, you know, you're bottling that, that's kind of cool. So thank you.
Thank you so much for participating. You know, originally I was planning not to interview space people, but I was thinking it's a good thing I was forced to change that, because how lame would this be if like 200 years from now, you know, it looks like that nobody on Earth knew we were going back to the moon. Nobody cared, you know, nobody was interested. You know, that would be such a bad perspective. I think it's important to have really everybody.
And you know, and the you know, from as somebody just, you know, watching it from the outside, that you're giving that opportunity for the folks who are coming to this as those outside people, for there to be a you know, a kind of a friendly place to hear, okay, here's somebody that, you know, they can talk a little bit more about it, and you know, kind of, you know, raise that awareness a little bit, but then also, you know, man, there's such a difference between, okay, here's a press release about going back to the moon, here's a you know, here's you know, here's a video of, you know, quarterly progress about going back to the moon, versus you know, versus the stories, versus the human, you know, like, hey, here's a dude, you know, here's a dude sharing like what it's like to be a dude, you know, kind of involved in this world, is such a different thing. So again, yeah, kudos to you for you know, making that bridge.
Well, thank you so much, David. And if you know anybody else that would be willing to participate, I have over 1,000 more days till I get to my end of my project. I could use as much help.
Sounds good. All right.
Well, you have a good rest of your day, David. Thank you so much. And next time you're in Houston, I hope you reach out.
Yeah. Sounds good. We'll do it. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.